All right, hello and welcome everyone to Hunting for Silver Linings for today. It's a Wednesday, December 30th here in the Great Lakes region. I'm with Startup Grind Grand Rapids. My name is Corey Hart, Chapter Director. It's an event series called Hunting for Silver Linings that my colleague Yorgo Katsanos of Beneventure Partners and I have been putting on since March. Startup Grind is the world's largest network of tech entrepreneurs and has a mission to inspire, educate, and connect. It's that mission that Yorgo and I seeking out innovators, investors, thought leaders, and ecosystem builders to join us and dig a little deeper for context around challenges and opportunities found in markets, sectors, and technologies. Um, with that, I'm really excited to be hosting and introduce everyone to Ross Mason of HINRI. Welcome, sir.
Corey, it's a pleasure to be with you today. Thank you.
Now, I've been trolling the internet and devouring a lot of content about you and your history, and we don't have the 30 minutes that would take for me to try to sum and give a proper introduction. So I'm going to have to let you do that for yourself. Yeah, so maybe just give our audience just a brief introduction on who and why you are.
Wonderful, Corey. I'd be delighted. I grew up in a small town in Georgia, Madison, Georgia, on a peach farm. Madison's the peach state. And I was really interested in Soviet history, which I studied in high school and did a summer program up at Phillips Academy. And so I ended up going to Georgia Tech and studying industrial engineering. And I did some humanitarian aid and missions work in Poland during the Solidarity Movement 1988, which is a very pivotal time in their history as a country and in the history of the Cold War, which was soon quickly to end. I had another group of friends that was in Red Square during the coup attempt in 91. I had been um, elected to a political office in college, student body president, and I needed to be there that summer. But that really put the drive in me to go spend time in the former Soviet Union because of the unique time in history. So I'd gotten into business school at the Wharton School, which is where I wanted to study finance, but I deferred and moved to Russia and did humanitarian aid work in St. Petersburg, then taught school in Siberia and did humanitarian aid work in Siberia. And then going through Moscow, visiting by way of Kiev, actually. And it was an interesting time because I had done a lot of missions work. And in Russia, then we were handing out Bibles out of trees because they were ripping your clothes off. They were so anxious to get a copy of the Bible. They had not had religious freedom for 75 years, and they've been passing down a page of the Bible across generations. And I ended up starting a real estate business in Moscow and leased to Western executives and companies. And it was an incredible business, a very unique time because they owned the property because of privatization, because of glasnost and perestroika, and then later Yeltsin, but they didn't have the assets to renovate. And so I would go in, and the Western executives were staying in a hotel for, they couldn't bring over their families. It was $1,000, $1,500 a night. So I would go in and renovate the entrance and the entire wing of a building, put in security, raise it to Western standard, pay the Russians market rate, but the first 3 months were free and they could watch me doing the renovation. And they were getting paid in US dollars, which were with inflation was an incredible investment on its own. And they could move 15, 20 miles away and live on 10, 15% of what I was paying them. And then the Westerner would pay me 12 to 15 months up front, 10 to 12 times what I was paying the Russians. So it was just a phenomenal business, very high risk business. I had one instance where the only time I ever rented to a Russian, it turned out to be the mafia. They turned it into a brothel and threatened to kill me and all my employees. We had to put everything on pagers and cell phones. And so I had a friend who was actually doing business with the mayor of Moscow's nephew, and he called in the GRU, sort of their special forces, and they had 25 men and special forces and machine guns storm the place and stick a machine gun in the guy's mouth and tell him they were going to kill him and every member of his family if he ever spoke to any of us again. And That was the last I heard from him. And that really was the formative influence in my development as a business as an entrepreneur. That and one other business experience. I went to a meeting with my father with the business associate of his, and I remember I was 13 years old, I think, and the gentleman on the other side of the table said, "Can you provide me with any references?" And he pulled out a sort of the equivalent of a spreadsheet and said, "There are 483 people on this list and all their contact information. This is everyone I've worked with in my professional life. You call anybody you want and ask them what it's like to do business with me." And that had such an impact on me. And I wanted to do business in that way. And it served me very well in Russia, because the margins were so high and it was a price insensitive because the Westerners moving over, they had a monthly stipend for housing. And if they didn't spend it, they didn't pocket the difference. So I would just, what do you want? A driver, a cook, a chef, language lessons, and just keep raising the price until they said, okay, that's our budget. And then I'd say, what else do you want? And I did the same thing with the Russian. And it really spoiled me doing business in that way. After Russia, I went to business school. I got a job on Wall Street in private banking at Morgan Stanley. I had been talking to a student body president from Georgia Tech 10 years ahead of me for, at that point, 8 years about working at Morgan Stanley. I did the training program in New York, London, Zurich, and Moscow. And the firm decided they did want to open a private bank in the former Soviet Union. There was 85 billion of capital flights from Russian individuals into Switzerland that year in 1997. But the firm was really uncomfortable with the liability risk. So I helped open an office in Atlanta. And then I really missed being an entrepreneur and being able to apologize or fix things or make them right. And on Wall Street, you've got a lot of legal and compliance issues. And I just couldn't sleep at night, honestly. It takes a long time to figure out who you can trust within the organization. They're some of the brightest, most talented, gifted people on earth at Morgan Stanley in that area in financial services. But it takes time to learn the system and the culture and who you can trust. And so I decided to move to Africa, and I traveled around Africa, worked in an AIDS hospital, and that got me passionate about healthcare. And I'll never forget a nurse. One of the nurses there was raising 22 of her relatives, none of her biological children. It was all of her cousins and nephews who died of AIDS. 86% of the patients had AIDS. There were fires around the hospital, and I asked what that was. And that was the families of the patients roasting game so the patient would have something to eat. And that's what summer of 99 made me decide I was going to try to bring hope, health, and healing to those in greatest need with a career focus on healthcare. I left Africa, went directly to the Canadian Arctic. We launched an adventure travel company with scuba diving and ice climbing. We're the first sport diving expedition to dive without cages with polar bears and walruses and Greenland sharks, et cetera. Then went to Silicon Valley and sold a healthcare software company and was mentored by one of the leading angel investors in the Valley who had done 432 angel deals in 5 years. And he was the very early money in Google and Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and Groupon. And I wanted to apply that model to philanthropy. So I created HINRI, the High Impact Network of Responsible Innovators. HINRI.org is our website. And I wanted, when I felt really, after praying about it a great deal, decided I needed to move back to Georgia. Atlanta is uniquely positioned to be the leader in global healthcare. Mm-hmm. And for the next 16 years, I would partner with healthcare innovators to accelerate their work for free, as angel investors do in Silicon Valley for entrepreneurs. They help entrepreneurs identify sources of capital, strategic partnerships, servant leaders, and customers, clients, partners of all kinds, and get them ready for venture funding. I wanted to accelerate the work of leading nonprofit innovators in healthcare and get them ready for large gifts of high net worth families and foundations. So that's what we've done with HINRI over the last 16 years. We sort of do three things. We have a portfolio of partners that we accelerate. So we identify a problem, define what success looks like, identify an innovator in an innovative organization, or recruit an innovator to the ecosystem, start a nonprofit, or create a coalition to solve the problem. We've done all of those four or combinations. Second, we want to create platforms of innovation to transform ecosystems in different strategic areas. For example, as part of our work, HINRI and HINRI University is now doing $1 billion neuroscience campus. We're doing a global health innovation campus. I worked on a 500 million euro campus with an additional 280 million euro venture fund with the German government, Volkswagen, and the city of Wolfsburg. And that was the model I wanted to bring to Atlanta. And that's now happening with a partnership of over 250 of our largest corporations, foundations, government institutions, including the CDC, American Cancer Society, Care International, others, to transform global healthcare. So number one is partners and individual projects to transform different areas of service in healthcare. Two is transforming ecosystems. And three is buying businesses and giving away a percentage of revenue. And those businesses then employ for-profit, nonprofit, or B Corps, the vulnerable populations we want to serve. So they create jobs and they build brand awareness with consumers and they create charitable annuities. So that's what we do with HINRI, and that's what I'm passionate and excited about. And that's how we partner. And then we've added a new fourth sort of dimension and platform, and that's an accelerator and venture fund to increase the sort of the velocity of that flywheel of those three areas of innovation and innovative focus.
That's a tremendous accomplishment. Congratulations on getting that vision built and working.
Well, it's very much a work in progress and process.
Sure.
It's been that's sort of been my life's work professionally, and I feel very blessed to be able to get up every day and do what I truly love and enjoy and find meaningful.
Well, I really appreciate you sharing some real deep intelligence on what HINRI, like how it's built and why it's built and why it works, right? Especially paying attention to the whole ecosystem and having a hand in all the different parts, right? To get that flywheel really operating. This is going to be a question that's a little off the list that we forwarded you, but when Yorgo and I speak about creating true wealth for ourselves, we like to break it down into the six types of wealth, like family, faith, health, education, philanthropy, and the last part is the least important part. That's the financial part. Like if we're focused and we have an abundance in all the other regions, the financial, like that often can take care of itself with some care. Could you speak maybe a little bit about, because you're touching on a lot of that with your ecosystem there, but the faith and health portions of that and the importance, because it seems like your history is tied there specifically.
Absolutely. Well, the most important thing to me is my faith. And I believe my calling and the work of HINRI is to match the resource with the need while ministering to giver and recipient by living the gospel with the focus on Christ. That's what we want to do every day. We work with people of all faiths, but we've been asked by the Joint Chiefs of Staff when Admiral Mullen was chairman to do a military program that's now partnered with Augusta National on vocational training. Jack Nichols, Tom Cousins helped launch that. And we're asked by the Obama White House to do a program on ending sex trafficking. And with the ecosystems, we've helped partner to create what I believe now is the nation's largest food app for food insecurity across the country. One of the top 2 or 3 free clinic networks in America, telemedicine networks in America, stroke networks in America, free pharmaceutical networks in America. And what we're doing is creating a model out of Atlanta. That's why Silicon Valley is so powerful. People from all over the world, the brightest minds go there because they think they can be the next Google, the next Apple, the next Facebook. And what you've got to do is you've got to create these engines of impact and innovation that are examples that are transformative with an ecosystem so that the flywheel, as we talked about, is going faster and faster. The most important conversation I ever had in my life, other than prayer, other than conversations with God through Christ and the Holy Spirit, was Corrie ten Boom when I was 7 years old. And Corrie, her family had prayed for the Jewish people for over 100 years, and Corrie and her father were rescuing Jews during the Holocaust, and they were caught, they were betrayed, and her father, the Gestapo, Nazis, SS, were really almost afraid of her father because of how respected he was in the community. They didn't want unrest by arresting such a righteous, well-respected person who's just above reproach. They said, "Mr. ten Boom, we know you're a man of your word. If you'll tell us you'll stop helping the Jews, we'll let you die in your bed." He's in about 86, I think. He said, "If you leave me here, I will do everything in my power to help God's ancient and chosen people." And he died in the gas chamber less than a week later. But after the war, and one of our major projects is working on a cure for paralysis, which I think we have now achieved, quite frankly, believe it or not. And it's transformative and so exciting with a partnership with the Veterans Administration in that area. But that goes back to Corrie. Corrie, having been in a concentration camp and what the Holocaust really started with the Nuremberg radio speech by Goring, where they announced they were going to exterminate useless eaters, beginning with the handicapped, the infirm, the disabled. And nobody reacted. And that led over time to the Holocaust. And they knew that they could get away with exterminating people, basically. Nobody stood up to them. And Corrie, after the war, was given concentration camps by the German government to help restore the homeless, the handicapped from the war, the dispossessed, the impoverished, the sick, the ill, that were German citizens. And she rehabilitated concentration camps to serve the same kind of demographic in many ways that they were created to extinguish in the first place.
Wow.
And that was so inspirational to me. And that was so critically important in the creation of the work of HINRI and the vision for HINRI. It was to combine the compassion, love, and community I encountered in that African AIDS hospital with the drive, innovation, and entrepreneurship of Silicon Valley to create spiritual, social, and economic Christ-centered change.
That's I hadn't heard that story about Corrie. That's powerful. Thank you. Now, as the startup grind ecosystem, all of our chapter directors, where we tend to our flock of entrepreneurs, technologists, etc., as best we can. A lot of people are they're so passionate, right, about their idea, their business.
Yes.
Some businesses are better as nonprofits and philanthropies. Some business, because especially when you start trying to sell your business to investors, as it's the right thing to do, right? What's the intake like? What's the criteria for HINRI for someone who is just trying to kick off a purpose-driven business or nonprofit? Is there a way to get plugged into what HINRI's doing at any level?
Yes, and we're changing how we do that, and I hope becoming more sophisticated. So if I might, let me answer that question in two parts, because every organization, like every individual, you hope, is growing and learning and becoming more refined, more focused. Bill Gates and Warren Buffett were having a conversation. Of course, they're dear friends. And they were trying to decide what's the most common themes we've seen in the most successful businesses and entrepreneurs we've encountered in our lifetime. And you've got to believe that's an impressive group that they're interacting with globally at the very highest levels. And they decided it was a combination of two qualities: focus and curiosity. And so those are very important to us. An alignment of values. So we have 5 values with HINRI. If you're going to do your work for free, you don't have any shortage of customers. So we look for alignment of values. So and that's really important for businesses, for people, to begin with the end in mind and determine what their values are, what really matters to them before they get into difficult decisions. So they know what comes first and what will not be sacrificed. that was what I was talking about with Corey. People had not made that decision, and it's like the proverbial, frog in the water that's gradually turned up. Number one for us is commitment to innovation. We believe if you're not living on the edge, you're taking up too much room. We don't want to partner with people who aren't truly innovative,
Hmm.
that are bureaucratic, large corporate or philanthropic organizations that really want to protect turf and not innovators. Second, they have to be willing to collaborate. There's an African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. We want to go together with the right partners. We want to outgrow our ability to contribute. So we're not looking for people, they want a hand up, not a handout. We want to help them accelerate and then go to the next project. So people that are willing to delegate, to have a culture of servant leadership, to empower others, um, and humility. We believe there's no limit to what God can accomplish if you don't mind who gets the credit.
Hmm.
So that's our fourth value. And then finally, organizations and individuals that are focused on compassion, love, and service, not brand, money, and ego. Oscar Wilde said, some people bring happiness wherever they go, others whenever they go. We want to work with wherevers, not whenevers.
Hmm.
And so we also, for the first 12 years, I never said no to a meeting. And I asked with one exception where there was a moral conflict and reason morally and ethically why I couldn't help this person. But other than that, I always say, how can I help you? I always ask two things. How can I help you and how can I pray for you in every meeting? Now, if I have determined that the person that I'm dealing with is a narcissistic jackass, because they're good and bad people in the world, I just simply introduce them to other narcissistic jackasses. And they're both so arrogant and unaware, typically, if they're selfish people, that they don't realize that that's what I'm doing. And I just introduce selfish people to other selfish people. I don't want to introduce givers to takers or vice versa. So that is a delineation that we make. And sometimes we make 3 to 5 introductions. Sometimes we'll help people for 8 or 10 years. It just depends on the alignment and conversion of mission, vision, and values. Does that answer your question?
It does, and I gotta say, like, this conversation has punctuated my life in the fact that now I'm going to be introducing narcissists to narcissists. That's that's the best solution to the biggest problem I've ever had as a connector. You know.
Yeah. Well, and narcissists generally don't know they're narcissists, so they
Right.
both try to take from each other. There's a wonderful parable, and it's of course apocryphal, but about the difference between heaven and hell, where there's a banquet table and everything's identical, and the people in both environments don't have elbows. And in heaven, they feed and bless and serve each other,
Mhm.
and in hell, they try to take what's on their neighbor's plate and fight and argue and squabble, and they can't feed themselves anyway.
Right.
And life is that way. But you don't want to mix the two groups.
So, 2020, obviously, big year for the globe, for the world, for humankind. And especially in some ways, it's been incredibly devastating. In others, it has seriously accelerated so much innovation, growth, mindset, and really connected the Earth in ways that we've never seen before. Wondering if you could highlight for us your impression of some of the so what's come out of 2020 for you, and then as we look around the corner into 2021, what do you see around the corner, and is that are you optimistic or pessimistic?
Well, I think they're incredible challenges, but I think those create new paradigms and great new opportunities. And I think about two people very specifically when I think about all the tragedy around COVID-19 and everything else we're going through with our economy and other countries around the world. Everything truly is relative. But I had a young man, and I'll that I think about in situations with adversity and challenge, who is such an overcomer. He was a legal immigrant from Cuba when he was 14 years old. He lived in my basement for almost 5 years. He graduated number one in his class with an ROTC scholarship. He was the first person in Georgia Tech history to get a pilot and navigator slot. He gave his valedictory address. Somebody ran a stoplight, him going 50 miles an hour on his motorcycle, and it killed him 4 times. He had 3 lawyers steal all of his settlement money while he was in a coma for 3 months. He had 28 injuries, including a complete spinal cord injury. And he is now getting his PhD at UCLA and critical to the cure for paralysis. One of his nurses wanted me to go swimming, and I did end up swimming 420 miles in 10 months. All I had was the use of my arms. But this is such a lesson to me about COVID and how we all feel. I've had over 40 caregivers. She's the first one who made that kind of commitment. And our first day swimming, she said, Ross, I don't want you to go past the 1/3 lane on the marker was the shallow end of the pool. I didn't realize why. Of course, I only had 30 seconds of lung capacity. So the lifeguard wouldn't be able to get to me in time. And so I was very dependent on her. And I was swimming 2 miles a day, 6 days a week. I worked up to. And 7 weeks in, we're getting up every morning at 3 in the morning, starting at 5, 6 days a week. 7 weeks in, she said, Ross kind of looks down at her feet. I need to tell you something. And I said, well, what is it, Alex? She said, well, I just think we need to have a talk. I said, okay, Alex, what is it? She said, you need to know that I can't swim. She's been my lifeline for 7 weeks. And she couldn't swim, but she had a double kickboard. She put on a thing around her waist, and she did it because she wanted to help me. And we're all in vulnerable situations, some more than others, but it's really through being a smile on God's face to those in need and his hands and arms of love. That's where community is restored. That's where the things, I think about the movie It's a Wonderful Life, which was voted the most inspirational movie by FI in movie history. And at the end, Clarence in the Tom Sawyer says, George, no man is a failure who has friends. Times like these are who you learn who your friends are, what kind of friend you are, and it brings us together. We've been through a lot worse as a country in the Revolutionary War and the Civil War. We can get through this. But what we need to do is understand, and one of the drivers of HINRI, I picked up a hitchhiker in college, and this is really drove me with HINRI and with everything I do, and it's so relevant with COVID and what we're facing. Um, I was writing a speech to the incoming freshmen, which when I did it, they said, look to your left, look to your right. One of you won't be here in 5 years. Georgia Tech, actually 2/3 of us failed out. Over half the engineers failed out or dropped out. And I was writing the speech, and somebody knocked on my door. A friend from high school had come in from out of town. He said, let's go. I said, where are we going? He said, we're going to Pan for Gold. So we took off. We ended up picking up a hitchhiker who had just been fired from the Huddle House. We drove up and dug up somebody's yard in Dahlonega during the gold rush in Georgia. That was part of where that was. Our gold dome we have a gold dome on our Capitol. And when we got back, we had picked up this woman, Lynn Jordan, bought her a 5-piece fish dinner. And I shared the gospel with her. I'd been done mission. I just said, I want you to know that God loves you. He sent his son to die for you. If you accept him, you can have a relationship and spend eternity with him. I've never felt so compelled to do that in my life. We got back 6 hours later, turned on the news. We only had 3 stations with a rabbit ear TV. And the announcer said, there's been a fire at the China Star Hotel in Lawrenceville, which is where we had dropped this woman off. She said 4 people have been injured and 1 person died, Lynn Jordan. That was the hitchhiker we had dropped off 6 hours before. And I said to the incoming freshman, when I was in your seat, they told me, look to your left, look to your right. One of you won't be here in 5 years. Let me tell you something different after telling that story. I said, I want you to look to your left and look to your right. It does not matter whether you graduate with a 4.0 or a 2.0, whether you're student body president or homecoming queen, whether you fail out and graduate from somewhere else or did not graduate at all. What matters is the eternal child of God that the creator of the universe, the Lord God Almighty, puts to your left and puts to your right in life. They are eternal. Your problems, challenges, triumphs, circumstances are not. Mm-hmm. And all that's going to matter in the end is what you did for the person that God puts on your left and to your right. So I see this situation as a blessing to help us revisit the things that matter most in life, our faith, The areas, 6 areas of wealth you outline: our faith, our family, our friends, our fellowship, and our impact in people's lives. And if this situation, as tragic as it is, reminds us to be deliberate and intentional about that, it'll be a blessing in the end.
Mhm. Thank you for that. Now, with your involvement in HINRI, and we're looking around the corner in that 2021, are there, without revealing anything that's confidential, are
Sure.
there certain energies or certain initiatives, whether they're public, private, that you're personally involved with or not, that you're excited to see coming out of this pandemic?
Absolutely. We were in the middle of a clinical trial at UCLA. I was personally. So in the United States with spinal cord injury, I'll give you a micro and a macro example. So the more specific example, um, in the United States, if you have a spinal cord injury, they test you within 2 weeks to see if you have any function or sensation below the break. If you do not, you're classified as a complete injury, meaning no fun. If you have function and sensation, you're an incomplete injury. So a complete injury is basically taught to be disabled in this country.
Mhm.
And insurance companies have lobbied Congress successfully to get you dumped on a Medicare after 2 years. So they have no financial incentive long term to manage for your care. And so they've lobbied to have one thing after another removed as medically unnecessary: handicap access to a toilet, a shower, caregiving, medical supplies. They've just pared back, pared back, pared back, pared back. But the group that is responsible for the lifetime of care of spinal cord injury is the U.S. Veterans Administration. They have over 26,000 veterans with a spinal cord injury, just under 3,200 that are quadriplegics. So they have 3 or more limbs impaired. The cost for them is $515 million a year, just the quads, $11 billion for their lifetime cost. In China, using our technology, the standard of care is walking 6 hours a day, 6 days a week for 6 months. In the US, it's 1 hour a week for 4 months on a robotic machine for an incomplete injury. You will never walk again with a complete injury.
Mhm.
And in China, using our technology, our research, our innovation, they're getting 75% of complete injuries walking again, even 15 years post injury. So we have created a combination of technologies, treatments, cures, and we now have the opportunity. We've gotten 12 out of the 12 last patients walking again, some of whom were in the chair for over a decade. That technology alone will save the VA over 50% on the cost of just their quads every year. So and we had an event for that before COVID, and we raised the money for that clinical trial. And we're now that a lot of those pledges aren't going to be realized, unfortunately, but we're partnering with the U.S. Veterans Administration on that clinical trial. There are 24 spinal cord injury centers, Emory's massive neuro campus, we hope, and some of the leading innovative researchers, including my 2 business partners, Ricky Kaplan and Howard Newton. Howard Newton is a triple PhD MD in neurosurgery from Oxford, who helped develop Skype and Wi-Fi, as Yorgo knows, was a founder of Incutel, the CIA's venture fund, took it from 24 million to over 4 billion in assets. Ricky Kaplan's the CEO of global healthcare for Tech Mahindra, and they have created a company called NITO, neural input to output. And I think on over 80% of the IP that Elon Musk needs for Neuralink. Newton also sold the technology to Google for what's now Google Earth and Google Translate. NITO also has a COVID solution, and we're a semifinalist or a finalist for the X Prize. There are 3 people left. So we've gotten $70 million of research from Oxford for the commercial aspect that has nothing to do with the clinical trial. So HINRI is focused on raising capital to fund that clinical trial for veterans to get out of their chairs. We're super excited. That's the micro. The macro has been my lifelong dream of the Global Health Innovation Campus in Atlanta. And that's what I mentioned. It's chaired by Russ Medford, Harvard MD PhD, who's a total genius, who had a $2.5 billion exit on one of his companies. And he's got his current company, Katsanos, incredibly exciting. But he's brought together the Metro Atlanta Chamber, 250 of our largest corporations, foundations, government entities, including the CDC. And they're advising governments around the world, governors across our country, the US government, and the CDC on COVID response. They've created a civilian center for emergency response. The CDC has one funded by Bernie Marcus, but it has such national security restrictions in working with foreign governments that we can't collaborate with the private sector. So it's got the COVID relief. The HINRI, we were going to do the neuro as part of the campus. That's now a separate campus. Now 26-acre, billion-dollar neuro campus with HINRI will be 72 acres. So those campuses, that one vision I had that caused me to create HINRI and move back to Georgia is now a reality in two campuses. One, $1 billion campus in North Atlanta. The other one we'll see, but they are going to take 500,000 square feet initially in the AT&T Tower, the largest skyscraper in Atlanta, and bring together Georgia Tech and HINRI. Georgia Tech and HINRI are number 2 in biomedical engineering in the country. HINRI's number 3 in neuroscience research, number 2 in the neuroscience clinical medical research program for the medical school. And I believe these two campuses will make them number 1, but most importantly, take advantage of the global transportation infrastructure leadership that Atlanta has with our airport, with the 4th largest port out of Savannah, with the largest healthcare IT aggregation of companies in America in terms of revenue, with our film and television industry, which in some years, like 2 years ago, passed LA, and a dozen movie studios for educational purposes, with our logistics, with UPS, and of course the airport and others, and the CDC's global health franchise and groups like the Task Force for Global Health, which gave away $3.3 billion of pharmaceutical in 135 countries last year. Bill Foege was another huge inspiration for HINRI. He's credited on ScienceHeroes.com with saving more lives than anyone in human history by eradicating smallpox. He was Carter's CDC director, the first director of the Carter Center, and got Bill and Melinda Gates focused on healthcare for the first time and chaired global health for the Gates Foundation. His group, the Task Force for Global Health, is Indicator. So we've got this incredible ecosystem from a nonprofit standpoint. We're in the top 5 in corporate headquarters, Fortune 500 headquarters, all those other assets I mentioned. The CDC alone does more research, and it's all focused on healthcare, but more research, period, than the university system in the state of California. Over $7.5 billion with 5,000 MDs and PhDs, without a focused, deliberate technology transfer strategy. So I'm excited to create that platform. Newton and Rick and I have co-founded the Aurora Forge to accelerate these and other enterprises in health tech, gov tech, fintech. What we're doing in AI, which I didn't talk about, machine learning and big data, is absolutely transformative for global health and national security. So at the micro, I'm thrilled about the spinal cord because I myself have one. I've been paralyzed from the collarbones down for the last 13 years. And it's all relative. You know, I thought, you could say, well, gosh, being confined to a wheelchair and paralyzed in that way is really tragic. No, it's an incredible blessing. It's an incredible platform. It gives me empathy and the opportunity to impact lives in a way I never would. I've been in the bed for 24/7 for the last 2 months. That makes the wheelchair seem like, the most unbelievable liberation and freedom. And then in the midst of that, 24 to 36 hours over Christmas, I had the worst episode of 8 to 10 dysreflexic instances for hours at a time. It's the most pain I've experienced in my life. And that makes the 24/7 in bed feel like a vacation on the beach with the ocean breeze. So it's all relative, and the COVID's the same thing.
That's
You're
great.
amazing.
Yeah, Yorgo, we have a few minutes left with Ross. I'm wondering if you have a few last questions before I ask my standard last one.
I'm speechless. I'm speechless because we have never encountered this spirit, this depth of knowledge, and this humanity. Homo universalis. Thank you for being with us, Ross.
True.
One of the questions that I have as far as 2021 is concerned is cybersecurity,
Yes.
because I see this pervasive world where we have sacrificed our independence, our privacy,
Yes.
and we're now taking hostages.
Yes.
What do you anticipate? What do you see in this
Admiral,
area?
yes, sir. Admiral Mullen is a dear friend of mine. He spoke at our Palm Beach event. He is, and we had dinner together, and he asked us to launch the vocational training that now Bertie Marcus and Arthur Blank have taken over. He believes that's the greatest threat, I think, to our national security based on conversations I've had with him. We are working on 3 or 4 projects using artificial intelligence, machine learning, big data to identify patterns of data in very sophisticated ways that are tracking down. And we're also doing it through Newton Howard's nonprofit. Newton's one of the brightest minds I've ever encountered anywhere in the world. Oxford doesn't give you $70 million for your research and say good luck. And obviously the Intel, the national government. He has a nonprofit called C4ADS. Newton identified for the Clinton administration the entire Al Qaeda network, their financial transactions, their communications network pre 9/11. We didn't appreciate the threat. He did the same thing before 9/11 for the Bush administration. He was being muzzled because he was part of the military industrial complex. He now has created a nonprofit to address that. So Newton Howard, a gentleman named Ian Mitchell, is one of the leading experts on fraud in America. We've trained over 10,000 fraud professionals to recognize those networks. The greatest challenge, though, in cybersecurity, Yorgo, and other areas is having a cohesive, coherent, strategic plan that maps together our vulnerabilities and has this is our Pearl Harbor moment. COVID-19 is a Pearl Harbor moment. We need to wake up. The Communist Chinese Party has our number. Those 2 colonels wrote the book Unrestricted Warfare in 1999. They outlined a very clear, very precise, very disciplined, very patient go model, not chess, go model strategic plan to take us out, to strangle our supply chains, to take over our port, our transportation infrastructure, our corporate community via Wall Street, investing in Chinese companies and pensions, our high-tech community. They have a very, very deliberate strategic plan for global dominance. We need to wake up and recognize that. The Islamic movement of jihad and terrorism, they have a very strategic plan. The communists, in the congressional record, we published their strategic plan. It is in our Congress, and they have outlined chapter and verse exactly. And the final one is with very malicious, and there's some good ones, but some very malicious people from a globalist standpoint that want to undermine our national security and national interests. And those 3 groups together all have very specific strategic strategies and plans that are very pernicious and that are very destructive. Rima DuPont, who is a complete genius, has the most brilliant strategic plan for this I've ever seen. She's advising people, the highest levels of our military and intelligence communities. She is the largest female defense contractor in US history. She started over a decade ago, 15, 20 years ago. She is the former prime minister of Lebanon's great-granddaughter. She speaks 5 languages fluently, including Arabic, which is her native tongue. She loves this country. And she came up with a strategic plan shortly after 9/11 to deprogram the risk of potential future Islamic terrorists and deprogram them. With 1 week of visits in Washington, she emerged with 100 million. Not many people do that to implement that plan. She got 1.7 billion of follow-on funding from that. She has the most compelling strategic vision I've ever seen to rebuild American civilization, our foundation, the pillars of our society, that is coherent, that is congruent, that is brilliant. And I think people realize that. She also has an anti-trafficking strategy to best global terror, and frankly, one for global evangelism as well, and to protect religious minorities from persecution. So those 3 groups Ian Mitchell and his work with the Noble, and Newton Howard with C4ADS and Rima DuPont, that trifecta of brilliant leaders and insights, together with a number of other groups that I know would prefer to remain anonymous. I've never been so optimistic about the future of our country as I am today.
Thank you. That's very informative, particularly because you pivoted in part from cybersecurity to global affairs. And I want to stay here for a moment because I really know how you enjoy international affairs, how active you have been in the past and in the present. Can you please just describe a little bit the outlook in terms of international post, if there is such a thing as post Bretton Woods? Are we heading into a gradual slowdown of the Bretton Woods system, whereby we created the United Nations, the IMF and the World Bank, the World Trade Organization, and all these fora that were essentially the stimulus, the platforms for world growth after World War II? And if yes, if we're beginning to see the dissolution of the post-Bretton Woods world, what is likely to be its replacement?
Well, I think there is a movement towards um, these massive global trends, massive global corporations, and massive global oversight. And obviously, the nationalist movements we're seeing through Brexit and Trump, the Trump administration, and the populist movement of nationalist populist movements in governments across Central and Eastern Europe to some extent, certainly the United States. And that is, I suppose, the outcome yet to be determined, and what the upside is on things like, and I think and hope and pray you can have both um, national sovereignty and strong bilateral partnerships. I think I think we, with a number of things like NAFTA or the Paris Accords or other things, the US has been operating under a post-World War II mindset where we had over 50% when we started that process of the world's global economy. And what Herbert Hoover did after World War I to stop famine in Europe, what we did with the Marshall Plan, we are no longer over 50% of the world's economy. We're 25% plus or minus. And we've got to have global partners. But I believe, if you're asking my opinion, which is certainly not as sophisticated as educated as your own, I'm quite certain, we need both national sovereignty and global alliances. To me, it goes back to what happened with Perestroika and Glasnost. And of course, I'm going to see things through that lens, given my background, and Reagan and Gorbachev, where they said trust but verify. It is not just pour in resources, it is trust but verify. And that is a very scriptural concept, by the way, with the parable of the talents. There, to some extent in the New Testament, you love and serve and give, but if you don't work, you don't eat. So there's that balance between those two of compassion and empowerment where there is trust and it's justified through experience. So we've seen 4 bilateral agreements that were based on commerce, with most recently Morocco with the Trump administration. We've now, NAFTA has been divided into really bilateral agreements, one with Mexico, one with Canada. That's the right way to build trust, in my view, and then build coalitions on top of that based on those relationships of trust, because you have more accountability nation to nation. These overarching situations like NATO or the Paris Accords, climate accords, or Bretton Woods, as you're talking about, those are extremely difficult. The United States no longer, we do control the world's shipping lanes. We tried to protect them, but because of poor leadership, we've lost the South China Sea and our ability to protect dominance there without risking a war. We also may be at threat with Taiwan and China's sphere of influence. They're taking a gradual approach to increase their hegemony with the Belt and Road Initiative and making very strategic and key initiatives. And we've got to realize that we are not in a position we were in 1950. The world is a different place. We can't have the same relationship with NATO and our allies, in my view, and we've got to build the foundational approach to these international agreements and start from the bottom up, not the top down. That's my opinion.
So you essentially agree with the perspective that the foreign policy will have to remain activist, will have to be global, and will have to be intentional as well as spiritual.
Yes, and Eisenhower warned us about the military-industrial complex. And I think if he wasn't informed on that subject, who on earth is or was? I mean, my goodness, the man's a five-star general. He was the commander of NATO. He was the supreme allied commander. He did not have a pernicious, malignant, or antagonistic view of our military or industry, certainly. But he saw something with a very, very unique perspective and training, who loved this nation and was a patriot. Certainly wasn't perfect. But I think I think we are extremely vulnerable to corruption. I think we have gotten away from first principles of character, morality, of faith, freedom, and virtue. That was why our public school system was created. And our founding fathers told us that. They said that our Constitution was written for a virtuous people, and it is totally unfit for the governance of any other, because it is saying our rights come from God, and it's looking for us through our consciences to govern ourselves. So we have two macro roads we can take. We can create dependence upon government and make government God, which we've watched fail all over the rest of the world, communism being chief among them. Or we can restore those first principles, govern ourselves, take this advantage to come together in communities and solve problems that government never can. I mean, I don't want the Department of Motor Vehicles running my life or the government healthcare system. I want community and people I love and trust and see me as an individual who don't see me as an ATM on a convertible belt, of a conveyor belt, and they just punch in the right code and they get the money extracted and send me. I want to be seen as a body, mind, soul, and spirit child of the eternal God. And we've got to get back to community, back to first principles, and back to, in my view, appreciating that our rights come from God creates an awesome responsibility for us to govern ourselves. Then we are equipped and capable of delegating to government. Otherwise, we're going to be told what our rights and freedoms are. So that's the fundamental challenge, that we've got to manage the home fire and get our house in order here. And then we will be in a much better position to deal with our allies and adversaries. That's my view.
Very profound observations, Ross, and thank you. To take it a step further, I'm looking at, particularly because of the alliances, because of the role of the freedom of the press, freedom of choice. Where do you see the big tech companies, the tech giants, this whole antitrust debate at the moment?
I think Section 230 is incredibly dangerous. I think it was very important at the beginning, but we are now with a global economy and global adversaries who want to destroy our economy, our culture, our global hegemony, and our freedom and our liberty, most importantly. And corporations are more global citizens than they are private citizens, and they can be used as a force for tremendous good. Coca-Cola obviously is here in Atlanta, and there's a reason why Atlanta is not Birmingham or a lot of other which they call Bombingham during the civil rights movement. Dr. King was here, Andrew Young was here, but one of the main reasons Atlanta was peaceful was Robert Woodruff, the founder of Coca-Cola, the chairman of the board of Coca-Cola, when Dr. King won his Nobel Peace Prize, they were going to have an event for him at the Commerce Club, and they couldn't sell any tickets. Nobody in the business community wanted to show up. Robert Woodruff published an editorial in the Atlanta Journal and Constitution. He said, you know, Coca-Cola is really a global company and brand. I'm just thinking, if we've got our first Nobel Peace Prize winner and the business community can't even come together to celebrate and honor him, then maybe Atlanta's not the right home for Coca-Cola, and we need to be looking for a home somewhere else. They sold that event out in less than an hour after that editorial appeared. That's the kind of global citizenship we need from our corporations. And I go back to Doberai Novo, you can say it, trust but verify in Russian. I'm going to butcher it. We need to give freedom and autonomy based on the demonstration of responsibility, accountability, and transparency. And if we are going to be censored and our free speech is going to be censored, and what we can see and hear through these platforms is going to be compromised based on a particular worldview, then they need to be treated as publishers in the case of HiChat, in my view. And we need to be careful about creating monopolies and oligarchy. It can be great, like you can have a benign dictator or a benign monarchy, but if you don't, it's a seriously oppressive situation. So we need, if we're going to have these special rights and privileges, we need corresponding responsibility and openness and transparency and accountability to be demonstrated. That's my perspective.
Thank you. In your sentences, I hope that our audience sees the depth of erudition, but also wisdom. And with this in mind, I would like to ask you my last question, because we've taken so much of your precious time, and I want to apologize for that. But the question is, again, throughout this discussion, you're touching upon the human capital, you're touching on processes, products, innovation indirectly. Can you, for a moment, look into innovation the way you have been practicing it, the way you have been advocating it, and tell us what are the key features of an innovator? Right. Where do you see yourself as an innovator on the one hand, but also what do you expect from thought leaders like yourself?
To me, the engine and genius behind innovation is a few key principles and ideas. Number one, it's defining the problem in a unique and novel way. It's framing the problem in a new paradigm so you're then equipped to solve it. Steve Jobs talked about, I'm selling the consumer what they don't even know they want or need. He was creating new paradigms by identifying problems in a new way. I talked earlier in the interview about Bill Gates and Warren Buffett talking about the two greatest ingredients of success they'd observed was focus and curiosity. That's critically important, but even more important, in my view, is perseverance. I mean, Thomas Edison tried over 10,000 solutions before he came failures, before he came up with the filament for the light bulb. And when his inventions, with all of his records and patents and research, burned down in the fire in Menlo Park, he finally went to sleep, and they said, you must be totally devastated. And he said, no, I've wiped the slate clean from all my mistakes, and I now get the unique opportunity to start all over. It's that perspective and worldview. I had dinner one evening with Jack Nicklaus, and I was really shocked at how he thought as I talked to him. It was so different. In what the mind of a champion is so different. And an innovator is an entrepreneurial champion who overcomes adversity, who sees things in a novel way, who perseveres. It's easy to see, hard to define maybe, what makes a Roger Federer, what makes a Jack Nicklaus, what makes you can see how different they are. They don't only have genius, they have work ethic, but they have worldview. And with Nicholas, he would talk about these things like in Cherry Hills when he was playing, I think in the playoff against Ben Hogan and I believe Arnold Palmer, and he was, 19 or something, and there was a divot in front of him, and he didn't fix the divot, and it caused his ball to go off course, and he went, but that was the best thing that could have happened to me. And he talked about, he won 19 majors, but he finished second in 18. And his perspective was always how this is working for the best and how it created an opportunity to overcome and how if he persevered. And the champions I know, whether it was the people I admire most, Corey Ten Boom, Demis Shakarian, this young man I talked about, Ignacio Montoya, he is going to create the cure for paralysis. He's going to do it. He's almost there. Who had nothing. He was a legal immigrant from Cuba as a 5-year-old. He's worked 3 jobs to support himself since he was 14. These people, they redefine what is possible because they refuse to surrender, and they will not stop looking at the problem in innovative and novel ways, and they're ruthless and unyielding in their pursuit of the solution and the fulfillment of their dreams. The focus is incredible, but the key is for innovation is to determine what problems you want to solve that are worth solving, that are critical. And that's what Stanford does with their program. They identify the key problems, and that's a critical. Then they invent a solution, then they implement it. Whereas other technology transfer offices are getting all this money for government research, and they want to commercialize it to make more money and rotate entrepreneurs, getting more and more ownership as they get IP and work and free labor from entrepreneurs, then find reasons to tell them, no, take that work and get more ownership with the next entrepreneur and repeat the cycle instead of really defining and solving key and critical problems. And that's where innovation begins, in my view.
And it's fascinating to me that you're referring in more than one ways to design thinking.
Right.
The idea of designing the outcome that you want to succeed in before you even are able to start or starting.
Absolutely. That is one of our core principles with HINRI. We define the problem, then we define what success looks like before we try to start addressing the problem. Otherwise, you get into mission creep. Our first problem, there were 1.7 million uninsured in Georgians, and we had some of the lowest healthcare demographics in America. Our first problem was, how do we address the 1.7 million uninsured? We said, okay, we're going to create the nation's leading and largest charitable care network. We're going to provide charitable care in all 159 counties in Georgia. We're going to serve 1 million of these uninsured. We're going to save the state healthcare system, where they're otherwise going to the emergency room for primary care, $1 billion a year, and we're going to do it in every county. So serve 1 million, save $1 billion every county. That's a really easy objective to understand. It's very difficult to accomplish. But notice we didn't go after the whole 1.7 million. We wanted to prime the pump and begin the flywheel, so the solutions then for the remaining 700,000 become obvious. And that's exactly what we've done. And you identify the problem, you define success, and then you keep coming at the problem in collaboration, as we talked about. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. You've got to have humility and servant leadership so that others step forward who have greater gifts than you do in lots of different capacities. I've never met anybody I couldn't learn from. None of us have, even if it's things to avoid, to not fail. And so I go back to those 5 key values of HINRI. Commitment to innovation. If you're not living on the edge, you're taking up too much room. Collaboration. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, together. Outgrowing your ability to contribute by empowering those around you and getting out of their way and giving them the credit. There's no limit to what God can accomplish if you don't mind who gets the credit. And focusing ruthlessly on people and projects that are committed to compassion, love, and service, not brand, money, and ego. And having those values as part of the paradigm to help define the problem and what success looks like before you begin is absolutely critical. You don't know if you've got alignment of vision, mission, and values if you don't know what your values are. So those have to be defined from the beginning.
I'm speechless by your wisdom, by your decision to spend this time with us. You have invested clearly in both Corey and myself with a series of ideas, and I'm sure that we'll be thinking about it all the way till tomorrow. I mean, it is extraordinary. It is the energy that you have empowered us with. I can feel it, I can sense it, and I can humbly be grateful to you. Thank you.
Well, I'm so kind. As I was thinking about this interview today, I'll close with this, Yorgo. There's something that really came to mind, and I was praying at Warm Springs. We went up and prayed with the pastor there where Roosevelt died. The March of Dimes came out of Warm Springs in the dining room there. Roosevelt went there 41 times, 27 as president. It's a real place of healing, and even was with the Indians. But as that pastor prayed for us, he quoted 2 Chronicles 12, verse 9. My grace is sufficient for you. My power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, which I have so many of, so that Christ's power may rest on me. When we get out of the way, that's when God goes to work. And he has chosen we can't do it without him. But for some reason, he's also decided he won't do it without us. But for him to do it with us, we have to get out of his way and say, thy will be done, not my will be done. So I'm grateful to have this opportunity to share with you guys. God bless you both. I've so enjoyed getting to know you, Yorgo, and Corey. It's a pleasure to meet you. And I look forward to the road ahead and the journey of innovation that we can share and travel together to bless others and be a smile on God's face to those in need and his hands and arms of love. I look forward to continuing that journey with you, Yorgo, and beginning that journey with you, Corey. God bless you.
Thank you so much, Ross. Thank you very much for the generosity of your time today, and we'll be sure to check in later 2021.
Well, absolutely. Please call anytime.
All right. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much.
Opportunity.
Thank you, Ross. Thank you.
Bye-bye.